Welcome to my Cancer Sun, I almost forgot, Aries Moon video. So here we take two signs again, and luminaries, just like the previous one I did, which was Pisces Sun, Sagittarius Moon, and we're taking another water sign in the masculine luminary, which is the Sun, and a masculine fire sign in a feminine luminary, which is the moon. And I find these particular combinations fascinating because we are taking a lot of contrast into the two major parts of the personality that develops earliest and usually in tandem with one another. And because the sun tends to represent father relationship as well as the more masculine aspects of society that were shown to you environmentally, and the moon represents the mother or the mother's influence and sometimes what you picked up unconsciously or otherwise from your mother's behavior. And then we take those and we put them in a total opposing energy and flavor. And so what it does is it can create a dichotomous personality that often needs to be fleshed out quite a bit in the early years. So Cancer Sun. So as you know, I tend to look at notes while I do this so I don't ramble. And Sun in Cancer, we've had this a couple of times now. So we know that the sun represents the ego, will, vitality, how we gain and lose power, how we take away or bequeath power onto others. And the sun in Cancer is a wellspring of concern and sometimes worry, of doting and nourishing others in times of need, right? So the vitality of a Cancer sun often lies in its feelings of security and its insecurity. We could make a blanket statement that says most people function better when they feel secure in themselves, but I think we've all known people that have a pretty high ability to function in a really successful way and still feel insecure. Some people use it as a driving force, and you certainly could do that here too. But a stable home life and a stable sense of who they are is important when developing the ego and the vitality. So if a Cancer finds that it's getting sick quite a bit, or it's getting reoccurring illnesses in the same area of the body, then it could very well be that they are either not creating a safe spot for themselves mentally and emotionally, while other things are fluctuating around them. So anytime that the home or family life becomes uprooted in some way or fractured, this could be positive or negative, then the vitality of the Cancer sun will suffer. Their ego is dependent often on how needed he or she feels. So the subject is, if the subject's currently nurturing something from seed, Cancers are really good at taking things from their very earliest, most basic stages and finding ways to patiently care for it and nourish it in the ways that it best can grow from there. And so if the Cancer sun is nurturing a person or an artistic endeavor, a home renovation, or even just, trying to upgrade or find a better home, perhaps it's nurturing a formal education or training. It's found something it really wants to learn. And that will give them a good sense of self when they're finding people, places, and things, including themselves, to cultivate. The Cancer feels the will of a Cancer. Now we talk about the will, and I often will compare this to a third chakra for those of you that have that that background. Maybe you can create a better analogy. Solar plexus, sun sign. We often don't think of Cancer and Pisces in particular of having a very strong will. So the will is strongest when it's protecting something or someone. In particular, it's home or family. Solar Cancer feels empowered when they have people or projects or just something that requires their assistance and their finely tuned emotional intuition. So when they're able to be part of anything that requires them to tune in and respond from a more visceral place. Cancer males and females generally, unless there's some sort of, other thing going on chart-wise, the idea of nurturing children, whether it's theirs or others, or nurturing animals, is very appealing to them because there's a lot of things that go on when raising another creature that is has nothing to do with concrete things like words and structures. There's a lot of feeling, there's some attachment, for better or for worse. There's seeing something grow and prosper from, a helpless, new, bright and pristine being into something that develops its own personality and its own sense of self and its own will and likes and dislikes. As a cardinal sign, they like to start things. Families, writing, books or music, businesses. Believe it or not, Cancer is pretty shrewd when it comes to starting and nurturing business. Elon Musk is a Cancer, and his story is very interesting. He basically nurtured a lot of businesses from the ground up and then sold them, nurtured and sold. And he continues to, even within his own company, find new little seeds to sprout up from time to time. And there is a shrewdness in the Cancer sun, especially if they have Mercury in Cancer too. So their intuition is great when it comes to creating an entity that can later nourish them. So they like to be part of that cycle, nourish them or their family or their home. Cancer moons tend to feel, Cancer suns tend to feel disempowered when others withdraw their trust or affection from them. Or when a Cancer sun can't make sense of where their emotions end and where another one's begins, which is a sense of building their own boundaries, which, the many Cancer suns, at least the ones I know, and Cancer moons will extend their help way beyond their physical, mental, and emotional capacities to do so, and end up at some point needing help themselves and not knowing who to turn to or who to ask, because they're so used to receiving the distress call rather than receiving the help. Cancer suns will give their power to others by consciously or unconsciously tuning into their needs and giving exactly what that person needs, or what that project or what that structure needs, sometimes to the point of enabling. So there is an over-nurturing quality that can happen here, where knowing when to let the little plants out into the harsh world so they can learn how to withstand the rain and the snow and the sun and the soil. That can be a hard thing for a Cancer sun to really do, especially because sometimes their ego is tied up in the nurturing of the other person, and they often see their worth, their security, based on how many people need them or their children needing them. And so it's important to be able to create boundaries, both for their sake and for the sake of their loved ones. They're excellent counselors, and they'll be great benefactors, and they'll give power to others in that way too. Now, they tend to take power from others in the same way that they act when they're disempowered. They tend to be very tit-for-tat people who again, it's not always consciously that they do this, but there is a bit of a tendency to believe that they have to make things right, particularly in an emotional sense, by treating another person in the way that they're being treated. So they might withhold affection, they might withhold, well, in particular, they'll hold grudges. Many Cancers are good at holding grudges, not because they're mean, terrible people, but their memory is very long when it comes to emotions, and many things will trigger emotional responses or reactions in them, depending on how you go. I define reactions as being more from a place that's more knee-jerk and visceral, and I define responses as something that you come up with after some quelling of the initial emotional responses that come out of that. So it's like you get triggered, but you recognize that you're being triggered, and you pause and you try to respond, which I feel has more thought behind it. So that's a little synopsis of Cancer Sun. Aries Moon, totally different thing going on here. So the Aries Moon's emotions are fiery and often alternate between extremes. I'm not going to say that it's always joy and anger, because it's not always, but it's common enough to see the emotional state be one way, and then an hour later for it to be pretty calmed down. Their intuition is based off of watching people. Aries is very action focused, so the moon security through doing, moon and Aries security through doing. So they feel secure when they see other people act a particular way, and then they feel like, okay, they walked their walk and they talked their talk, so I can trust them. But on the other hand, Aries has a somewhat short memory for anything, particular moon in Aries, for anything that happened emotionally. They can be a little bit too quick sometimes to forget people's patterns, or to not want to look at the red flags, and they'll give second, third, fourth, fifth chances, sometimes to the people surrounding them's chagrin. What makes an Aries moon feel at home is the room to vent, to espouse joy, and to break a few things when they have to. They like to surround themselves with doers, and will often make emotional connections with people of all walks in life, but particularly people who are getting out there and being action focused. They also feel at home, believe it or not, like debating and feeding off of the chaos, or the other C word, conflict. And sometimes to the point where it becomes overly dramatic. There's a melodrama there that occasionally pops up. And if you have an Aries moon in your life, an Aries moon erupts in some way, shape, or form, and it starts to make you, whatever that means for you, remember, it'll pass. And if you look back, you'll be, oh yeah, that usually does pass. Why do I react to that so much? So they do like a good date. And they can sound hot-headed during a debate. They can even seem a little closed-minded, but in general, sometimes their first sentence or two comes out rather black and white, but as they go on, you'll see that they do see the nuances. It's just not their initial emotional response here. They also understand innately, because moon is more of innate understanding, that friction does eventually allow change to take place. So they express emotions with passion and a certain urgency. They might run hot and cold when it comes to their opinion on people or society or their ideals, but they interpret emotions as though everyone is on their wavelength, which is usually blunt and to the point. So they often don't see below the surface and or want to look below the surface, because that would require too much time and effort and contemplation. And so it's probably just better to take people at face value, because Aries moon is not going to necessarily beguile you when it comes to how they feel about things and people. There could be other parts of the astrological chart that point towards manipulation or being subversive, but if we isolate Aries Moon and say it's, it's an emotional thing, it's about their security, it's about their close personal emotional connections, if they tell you something, it's probably very true. They can be quick to sometimes blame others, especially when they're threatened emotionally, so viscerally. They can lash out with anger or cruelty or just like storming off. They could be quick to blame others for their own shortcomings, but then quickly apologize. Sometimes you don't know if they're apologizing just to like get over it, like, okay, let's get past this, or if they actually really feel, all right, yeah, I definitely had a part in that. Sometimes partners can express a desire, and Aries Moon will say, well, what about my blah, blah, blah that you just said? And there's a tendency to deflect, and I kind of look at it as, if you think of Aries being symbolized by the ram, I almost think of it as these dogs down here. I don't know if you can hear, but they are sighing and snoring like crazy. So I think of it as the headbutt. The Aries gets butted with something, particularly in the moon sign, where they find out that someone's hurt by their actions. And for whatever reason, society in general, but particularly these fiery moon signs, will say, well, hurting someone is wrong, and being wrong is bad. Because that's unfortunately how a lot of us grow up. And so then they butt back and they say, well, you do that to me. So then, there's this process of evolving and growing up to like cover the horns and be like, all right, this person just expressed something to me. I'm going to address that. I'm not going to rebut with the same exact thing. So, when you can always tell, this is actually really important. Well, we'll get to that later. Sometimes Aries Moon will bypass the anger, or the what about me situation, and they really do want to fix the problem, because Aries feels like they can fix things. They don't like to get too mired in, the woe is me part of things either, and they don't like to see other people do it. Aries Moon can learn to be great listeners, and they can be really good at not making the same mistakes twice. It's just a matter of getting them to slow down and think about what other people are feeling. So how do these two signs and luminaries interact? Well, you may have known already by the other videos or just by your own astrological knowledge that if these two luminaries are within 9 degrees of one another, the aspect between them becomes a square, which is considered quite challenging. And so these squares, I think, are really great for developing a lot of character. That's a good way to put it. Requires a lot of introspection and some spiritual work, however that comes off to you, whatever spiritual means to you, to balance the different qualities. And it develops a personality full of flavor and sometimes unpredictability, and that's just how it is. So early in life, Cancers sometimes might prefer to hide from the big bad world. The hermit shells come out, and when they get wounded, they tend to hide in a corner. But with the Aries Moon, the dichotomy of the two elements and dualities will come through in some unpredictable ways. So because Aries is the moon sign, if you insult this subject's family, of course Cancer is always going to be protective of family anyways, but if you suggest anything about their family or something they're emotionally connected to, like you make fun of a hobby or an interest that they have, they can really get quite pugilistic if you catch them on the wrong day. Cancers have the reputation of being a bit moody, because sometimes Cancers are too focused on what's going on around them and too focused on taking things in. And this is where that boundary thing comes in. So the ego of a Cancer might be able to put up with the taunting because they don't care if you insult them personally and say things about them, call them ugly or whatever. But the second you start to make fun of families, friends, anyone that they feel protective over, just be careful, because they'll kick your ass. Cancer males in particular, because of society. So if a Cancer male is growing up in what I consider to be the typical patriarchal society and household that most of us grow up in, whether it's a conscious or unconscious unveiling, it's more of a patriarchal type of world we live in. The lines are blurring, but The males in particular will have a difficult time getting along in a masculine-focused society, especially since their natural inclination is to cling or be clung to by their mother. The feminine traits of high sensitivity and receptivity, as well as being emotionally demonstrative, are not always prized in most environments. Like, if anything, anger is okay if you're a guy. But if the Cancer male grows up thinking that they're more tender or melancholy or receptive qualities, and their desire to recede a bit from conflict, if they get the impression that they're not manly or acceptable, that can really, mess with them, create a really angry, repressed individual. Now, of course, that's going to be true of any guy, any female, anyone that's told these feelings are bad, these feelings are good. And if you grow up actually believing and buying that, which we can't really help it if that's what we see. But in particular, the Cancer male, I've noticed this, I've just seen enough of it. So ideally, they grow up seeing that, their father is okay with expressing emotions. They don't get chided for crying or being emotional. The mother, they have a healthy relationship with the mother. Hopefully it's not too overprotective. So if, the Cancer emotions are well expressed and encouraged, and they're not told this is X, Y, and Z is right, but A, B, and C is wrong, then that subject, the Cancer that's able to become more comfortable with their emotions, is a really secure individual, really super secure. Like we said, the vitality has a lot to do with what's going on in terms of their security. So the Aries Moon might pick up more keenly than just like a typical Cancer combination that anger is an allowable emotion, especially in men. And if they see it demonstrated a lot as children, like, either at home or TV or whatever, then it could be that that's their default to anger and outrage. And then maybe they default into Cancer. Oh, let me listen to you. Let me feel what you're feeling. But this combination can create a lot of hot and cold. So, we have somebody who might be really comfortable feeling and expressing the whole gamut of their emotions, depending on their environment or how well they develop themselves internally. To have the healthiest mental state is to not have repression hardwired into them, or to rewire themselves into that, because being able to emote is really important for both of these particular placements. Cancer suns can get a bead on what makes the people around them feel powerful and strong, sometimes without knowing it, especially if they have Mercury in Cancer too. They can sort of passively control how others think, and tuning into like that clairsentient quality, that gut feeling. And that's a problem if the Cancer doesn't know that they're doing it, and it's great if they do. So there can be a sort of unintentional manipulation that goes on, and it's important for a Cancer sun to know that they're capable of that. So how busy an Aries moon is will tell you a great deal about their emotional state. When I first saw this, I sort of kept it in my head, and then I went back and I looked back at other Aries moon, and now I've been keenly aware. I see this a lot. I don't know why I attract a lot of Aries moon people. Could be the Mercury or, my other fire going on. But in a less self-aware Aries moon, when the expression of the moon is less evolved and it's more dependent on their external environment, if they don't feel fulfilled by their home, their love life, their partner, or there's unresolved issues from how they grew up, which we'll go into in a little bit, and they generally just don't feel secure overall being alone, and they will make themselves very, very busy, really busy, to the point of making themselves sick. And that will kill anyone, but imagine a Cancer who needs time to recede into their shell. They need alone time. They need emotional recuperation more so than a lot of other solar signs. So now we've got like a mental breakdown waiting to happen. The cure for this is the Aries moon just feels a lot of urgency. And when they feel things pretty strongly, even if they fizzle quickly, it doesn't matter. So to be able to feel things and not get too attached to those feelings, and to know that sometimes their thoughts, they're not their thoughts, and they're not every feeling that pops up. So when they start to use their fiery, urgent feelings as a vehicle for building up their own hopes and dreams, rather than just making themselves mindlessly busy so they don't have to be alone with themselves, or they don't have to be around people that they're not getting the right fulfillment from. Essentially, they have to learn that their fulfillment comes from themselves. So once they learn that whatever attention they received or didn't receive as a child, or as a teenage years, that's in no way a reflection of their worth. It's not about how other people are reacting to you. In no way does it carry over into adulthood, any of the things that we experienced as children, but we tend to carry. So if Aries Moon tends to their own passions and dreams, and they cross off the meaningless busy work off their calendar, then they will go far very fast, and they'll be a great example of others how to tend that sense of urgency. So early on in life, Aries Moon's mother or mother figure, because it's not always mom, may have been a very busy person, may have been running a business or helping to run a business or raising a lot of kids, or they may have had a job that was unpredictable or maybe dangerous in some way, or adventurous. So it's been my experience that Aries Moon generally thinks that they either didn't get enough attention, discipline, or just overall quality time with their mothers growing up. For one reason or another, there could be myriad situations, right? So this would be a rather unsettling feeling for most people, but particularly Cancer, who is going to be automatically just mother-focused. So if mom was around and provided all the things that a mom could provide at her own expense, then this particular combination might become protective of mom. If mom wasn't around and did the best she could, and she still loved her kid, but this subject might seek attention from others, in particular women, just sort of blindly in hopes that they'll fulfill that need. So it could happen. It's not always how it works, but and then the other thing too is because both Cancer, female and male, solar and lunar, will have a stronger connection to mom than most. Just know that it's for better or for worse. So you have to be able to realize, whether you're the subject or you're the mom of the subject, that try not to use that. If you're the mom of a Cancer, Moon, or Sun, try not to use that against your kid unknowingly in some way. Let them do their thing. Try not to impose your values on them for in adulthood especially. And if you are the subject, just take a look at your relationship, because you will try to create in your relationships with women, whether that's love, friendship, or mentorship, or whatever, you might try to fill in the gaps that you felt like you didn't get from mom more strongly than the average person would. All right, so let's go into the big differences between these two signs and how they might manifest. Okay, so Cancer's a homebody, enjoys simple activities, spending time with their favorite people, and Aries likes to be constantly stimulated, meeting different people, and having a good row now and again. All in good nature, of course. Aries sees busyness as a form of keeping their emotions in check, and Cancer needs time to absorb and assimilate their highly active emotional state. Cancer Sun can take a lot of blows to the ego, sometimes just to avoid getting into a fight or creating waves, but Aries Moon might explode when you least expect it. Cancer can be a bit wishy-washy at times, but Aries is pretty direct. Aries doesn't have a lot of staying power. They like to start a lot of things, and they have a lot of projects and things they want to do, but the staying power would have to be present elsewhere in the chart. Cancer has a little more staying power. If they're really emotionally invested in something, they will, like I said, nurture it from seed to whatever it turns into. If the Cancer ego does get wounded, sometimes the Aries Moon will pop up, and give people a piece of their mind every now and again, particularly when it comes to family. As much as Cancer will let themselves be beat down quite a bit sometimes by their family. And the Aries Moon doesn't care if you're blood or not. If it starts to feel too threatened, the horns will come out, and you will hear it. But there are some similarities. Both sides are cardinal, so they like to start things. Aries Moon tends to have a million ideas a minute, and if Cancer Sun can get a hold of one, like I said, it can be really successful. Don't always necessarily, take it on forever. Like I said, it might come out more like a start something and then send it off when they're done. An evolved expression of these two luminaries will exude enthusiasm for others' ideas and projects, like ridiculous. Aries Moon gets really excited when other people around them are doing what they love, because that's what they want to do, or hopefully it is what they're doing. And they know just how to say the right things and to do, and they're very generous with their help. Aries Moon in general doesn't have that great attachment to money or material goods. Cancer gets a little bit more attached, but they'll give money, they'll give resources, they'll give contacts. Cancer will sometimes put themselves on the back burner, often to their detriment, to care and aid for another person, or to get some enterprise off of the feet. Or if somebody's ill, they're usually the first person to come in there and start taking care of things. And there's a lot of compassion there too. If someone's been down on their luck, they see it and they immediately want to jump in and give them a little push. So the combination could lend a sassy sense of humor. They tend to possess a fairly good sense of timing, like when to jump in a heavy emotional situation and how to make light of it without being crass, right? And overall, I would be friends with this person. Sure, I would be friends with everyone. So it's a really interesting combination. There's a sense of emotional attachment and love and nurturing, but there's also a sense of got to get going, got to get moving. And so those two things, hopefully, as the subject evolves, will create somebody with a lot of nuance who can balance their highly attuned, sensitive state with the ability to go after their deepest desires, to go after what pleases them, in an effort to show people that the only person that can really please you is yourself. And when that starts happening, then the Cancer can truly come out and shine and nurture others, when they are fully taken care of by their own sense of self, right? Okay, so that is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want a reading, you know where to reach me. It's down in the description. And I don't know what I'm going to come up with next, but either way it'll be good. If you have a suggestion or a request because of, you want a particular sun and moon combination, whether it's yours or somebody else's, just put it in the comments. I do get to them, and I will try to tag you. Okay. Bye. Thanks for listening.